So, okay guys, for today's video we're going to be talking about all of the strengthening quests for 2023 on an A. I did a video like this last year. It was all remaining strengthening quests. I didn't actually produce it until a couple months into the year. So again, we're just going to start from the beginning here since we're still in January as of me recording this. And again, you guys can say hi to chat because we are live on stream. So starting off here in the get-go, we have again going to be the, I believe this is the second skill here for Yagyu. And as we pull him up right here, you guys can see this is his dodge skill. It basically goes from just being the evasion and the attack for one turn of 20% there for the attack to all of a sudden now it also gets the critical damage of 100% up for one turn. It's a really nice buff. I actually do like it for him because he's often compared to Lancelot, and obviously everybody knows Lancelot is more of like Crit-a-lot. He's the guy that basically just sits there and churns out really good card damage and crits. Now, the issue I have with Yagyu is while he does typically do really good NP damage and still has been a decent unit for challenge comps, he ends up having a little bit of an issue with sort of like performance over time compared to just raw output from Lancelot turn after turn. So giving him a turn at which he can absolutely crit really hard, definitely a nice thing. However, I think my one criticism of this would be that out of everything, I think I would have really just liked to have seen Yagyu get multi-turn durations on some of his skills. So hopefully they revisit him, but still, I'm never going to look the gift horse in the mouth when it's suddenly just 100% crit damage added to a unit. Next up here, as you guys can see, we've got Benkei. This is going to be his NP interlude. And again, this was another interesting one because for starters, Benkei had always been sort of that debilitation type servant. He's a unit that really excels at crowd control. I think the biggest issue that a lot of people had with him is because he's a low star, a lot of his skills have a chance to just get outright resisted. They don't go all the way up to 100% in their leveling. Even then, most people don't want to use that lore just to even get them as high as possible. So a lot of people just sort of make do with him or just don't use him at all. The good part about this is now they've given Benkei with this NP interlude the ability to remove buffs with his NP, as well as increasing the curse damage that he's going to inflict to people. Again, I actually really like this from the standpoint that not only will he be able to lock units down with his skill seal and NP seal, but he's also now going to, on top of the stun he has with his NP, have the ability to remove buffs. So that is going to be really good at setting someone else up for being able to deal really good damage. So again, I think this is a relatively rare thing to have at low servant rarity, so definitely a nice buff for him in that regard. After that, we've got Ushi coming up here, and again, we were already in the Little Big Tengu right here, which again is what we're recording during. And you guys can see here, Ushi gets the upgrade to her charisma. It went from party attack of 3 turns of 17% to party attack of 3 turns of 20%. It also adds a 50% self crit damage for 3 turns and a crit star bomb. Again, this is going to just help Ushi's card performance, which I think was, I'm not going to say bad, but just certainly you could tell, yes, she is a 3-star and she was not hitting very hard with it. So this definitely helps her pop off a little bit harder. Some people would probably question as to why Ushi needs anything like this. I totally agree. I think Ushi is one of the sort of best taken care of 3-stars over time here, just with the amount of buffs she has got. But still, I really like this. More crit damage is always nice. And the crit star bomb, because she's a rider, she naturally has a high star absorption rate. So that's going to be a really good one for her. Again, we are starting out here with just these miscellaneous ones as we're going through the schedule. We will get to the actual strengthening campaigns deeper in, so just bear with me on that. Next one up here, we've got Caligula's NP interlude. Now, this one is another interesting one. And the reason why I say this is because this certainly helps out Caligula on the offensive side of things. Those of you guys that aren't aware, Caligula is one of the rare low star units that actually has Imperial privilege. So he's someone that at bare minimum can be able to at least card decently hard, especially as a berserker. I think the big issue there is that ultimately at the end of the day, that's just more of a fun thing for challenges. You don't really want to have to do it because Caligula has a little bit of an issue with survivability. And so in that regard, this NP interlude doesn't do anything to help that, but I digress. It's still going to help out his damage, and that is what it is. Again, I think the bigger issue here at play is just that when using his NP, yes, you will get the damage boost now here by reducing their defense for 3 turns, but you're also going to be skill sealing them. And if you're skill sealing them, you're kind of leaving them no choice, especially since you've also got a chance to NP seal them here, and it's not a totally insignificant chance. you're basically just going to make that enemy just kind of focus on carding, which is probably the worst thing that Caligula would hope for, because that just means they're going to start hitting the entire party, or potentially just him. So that is something you're going to have to be careful of. I would use this when you really think you can pop off and when you can really deal a lot of damage. Still not a bad buff though. Okay, next up here we've got Boudica's Guts. Again, this is going to be another interesting one. Basically, she just got the self guts of 1 time 5 turns of 2500 HP, and it gets changed to be a targetable skill. So now it's still the same guts, but it's now targetable, and then it also has the ability to heal the target by 2000. This sounds great, but I think one of the issues that I maybe have with it is I don't really like combining healing with guts, because if I'm gonna use the guts, I want the guts to have gotten popped. The good news is this isn't a huge concern on this one, because the duration of the guts is 5 turns. So you're more just delaying the inevitable at that point, rather than like, hey, the concern that I maybe have if you have a heal on a 3-turn guts is you might heal just enough and they might not get targeted during that time that your guts just falls off, and then you don't get the benefit of it, and then they hit you the turn right after and then you die. So the one thing I like about this is at least it's on a skill that has 5-turn duration, and max HP up is another nice one because it can't really be wasted, so you can sort of preemptively pop this on people even when they're at full health. So this is still an adaptable skill, and I do like it. It kind of helps Boudica's general ability to be used, especially since she's been a more odd support over time. All right, here, so for our next one, we've got Kid Gil. This one's going to be coming up at Valentine's Day. This is definitely an interesting one. It's going to be the upgrade to his charm, and for those of you guys that haven't seen, they've actually started going back through a lot of the charms over time and sort of just readjusting them. I think they realized that a lot of the charms just were lackluster. They were locked to a gender and they had poor scalability in terms of the chance. Even if you can get to 100% chance on a charm, it doesn't mean it's always going to land, because enemies can have magic resistance, or again, they could just be debuff immune to a particular type. But again, it gets upgraded to now have a chance to charm 1 humanoid enemy for 1 turn of 100%. So instead of the 75% max, you now have 100%. So if the enemy doesn't have magic resistance, this should land every time. And then it's also going to give him the ability to gain critical stars every turn for 3 turns of 10 each. So again, basically an MLB fragment of 2030 right there as a skill. So not a bad upgrade for Kogil. I think he definitely is somebody that really could have used something, because to me, he had kind of been one of the worst archers in the game. And that's saying something, because if he's considered to be one of the worst ones, damn, the archers are really good overall in terms of their kits and class. That has been a saying for a while. There's no such thing as a bad archer in this game, and I think we can beg to differ on certain units and certain points, but still, yeah, this is definitely a nice one, considering I think Kid Gil was someone that was probably bringing up the rear a little bit. Okay, so the next one after that, we get Arthur, and this was a particularly contentious buff when it happened. Again, this is going to be part of the 23 million downloads campaign, so keep in mind this could move around on an A. All the dates that you guys are seeing are 2021. Logically, this is for the JP server that is 2 years ahead of us, so just basically change that to a 2023, and that should be your date. Keep in mind, though, they are probably going to crunch the schedule maybe forward a little bit. We'll see, but even with that, download campaigns tend to move around. They tend to do them when they want to. Mostly whenever we hit a milestone, not necessarily exactly when JP did, though they tend to keep them in the same area around the same time. It just may not be the exact day you expect it to be. But either way, so as we look at Arthur here, again, this is the upgrade to his mana burst, and I saw a lot of people get a really weird perception of this. So his mana burst was buster up for 1 turn of 50%, just strong, but it's kind of a year 1 type of ability. And now he gets Sign of a Red Dragon, which increases his own burst performance for 3 turns of 50%, and then also increases his own NP gen rate for 3 turns of 30%. Now, I will admit that, honestly, I kind of hate the fact that they gave him NP gen here, because it's not really the most useful thing that they could have given him. That being said, Arthur doesn't really have the best NP gen, so it's not really that bad of a deal, especially if you do end up having to card with him at some point. And Arthur does hit really hard with his cards because he has really high attack power. He's tied for, I believe, 2nd highest amongst all sabers. So again, another really nice one for him to have here. But I think the other thing to look at here too is that as you start thinking about things from a double Koyanskaya perspective into the future, you start thinking about not only is this 3-turn duration now, but it's also on a 5-turn cooldown. So this is a skill that can be popped basically on turns 1 and 2 of a double Koyanskaya setup. Now, some of you, if you know your stuff already on the Koyanskaya systems, might be saying, okay, Cad, but I probably can't run him with double Koyanskaya and still be able to 3-turn because he's only a 20% charger. And you're right. That probably would require him to have some sort of additional buff to his charge, or maybe even to his MP. They could give him the mana loading type deal after his MP, kind of like some of the other Artorias have, where he just gets like a 10% refund or something like that, kind of like Salter or Gray. Or maybe even it's the 20% like OG Artoria has. But either way, giving him any more charge would allow him to become a 3-turner with double Koyanskaya. That would then make this actually a really nice buff because you would be able to double up the 50% buster ups, and that would make him hit really hard. So again, this still could be a really nice buff, but at the time it wasn't the NP interlude everyone was waiting for, and we still don't have that one. So be on the lookout, as that might be coming up here for Arthur at some point on JP. Next up, we've got Jing Ke, and we're now in the Slapstick Museum one. There are quite a few upgrades here. I believe this is Jing Ke's buff that turns her into a very nice assassin. Yeah, so it's planning, and it goes to kill a man in 10 steps B. This is a really good one because it gives her the king trait. So basically, she just had the increase to critical star generation for 3 turns of 30% on a 5-turn cooldown. And then it instead gets changed to increase own damage against king enemies for 3 turns. So she gets a nice 50% power mod here against any king traded enemies. And again, that tends to be anyone who's sovereign. So anybody that is of royalty in any sort, they tend to have the king trait. So there are quite a few riders that actually have that. So this is a nice thing for her to basically have. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's still a really nice way for her to stand out. It's also going to grant her a self on attack activate debuff for 5 times over 3 turns, where she will inflict defense down by 10% for 3 turns to an enemy whenever she attacks with quick cards. The important thing to note here is it does not say when normal attacking, so her NP will also count for this. So that is a really nice thing. Basically, you can use her NP, you can use her quick cards, you can potentially get up to 5 times in 3 turns, 10% defense down for 3 turns. So again, you're just going to keep stacking those defense down, especially if you're in a type of solo environment with her. And then on top of that, she increases her own critical star generation rate for 3 turns. So basically, I believe it was already the 50%, but now instead of it being, oh no, sorry, it was only 30%. So now it goes to 50%. Still another really nice thing for her. So I do like that upgrade. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it definitely helps a unit that was in need of some kind of attention out. Leonardo da Vinci's up next. This is again going to be her charge per turn skill. As you guys can see, golden rule here was debuff immunity of 2 turns, HP every turn for 3 turns, and the ability to charge her own NP gauge by 10% every turn for 3 turns. And it basically goes to Mona Lisa A, which is again going to be the same, but it also gets party-wide arts performance. So yet another case of Da Vinci sort of helping out the party as well as herself. So really nice. It's an additional 20% steroid she didn't have before. It really helps her just kind of stand out over time. Da Vinci's always been one of those just really good AoE casters for people. And a lot of that is just because she's also had upgrades where some of the others haven't. But this one definitely helps, especially in the face of 1, buffs that are upcoming here that we're going to talk about, and 2, just in general helping keep her at the top of the list, sort of as one of those really limited, hard to get units. Next up here, we've got Amakusa, and this is going to be his charge skill. This is another interesting one. They're all interesting to some degree, right? But basically, Amakusa's sort of like Janu in real need of just some upgrades over time, because he's just one of those really early rulers. They didn't really know how to balance them at first, and you can kind of tell, because a lot of this is just their skills were really restrictive because the devs were really worried about sort of what they would be capable of as a unit that's just naturally resistant to everything. On top of that, as you guys know, Amakusa removes all buffs with his NP, so I think they've naturally been a little bit wary of him over time. But so basically, they take his charge per turn every 5 turns here of up to 20%, which already in and of itself is really nice. and they basically upgrade it to it also, instead of just reducing undead or demon enemies in P gauge, now becomes reduce one enemies in P gauge by one. So sort of, we're going to talk about John's buff upcoming here, but a little bit of a similar treatment here where Amakusa has a very restrictive skill. It has to only work on those types of enemies, and changed it into, hey look, this just works on everyone, because it was stupid to have that restriction in the first place. So now it's just a straight up one enemy targeted drain. It's also going to reduce all the enemies buster resistance for 5 turns of 20%, so not bad. And then it's going to also charge the NP gauge by 20% up front. So Amakusa gets 20% charge per turn, and I've talked about this before, but basically if you're in a 3-turn scenario, right, that means you get 20% at the end of turn 1, 20% at the end of turn 2, but then you're in turn 3. So assuming the wave or the node ends after turn 3, then any charge that you would get after this point would be functionally worthless. So this is still great for challenge content, right? You're still going to be able to realize a lot of that if you're going more than 3 turns, but in a 3-turn scenario, this basically meant he was only a 40% charger here right there with that. What this does, this allows him to charge up front 20%, so now he becomes a 60% charger, but this also means that this allows him to work with something like a normal K scope. This is actually really interesting too, because, you know, after this point, pins actually end up coming out on JP, and he ends up sort of becoming like this ends up being a little bit of a weird, almost short-sighted upgrade. But ironically enough, that actually allows him to start operating from a 60% CE if you had the maxed out mana loading. So at first it looks like it's weird, then you start to see that it's useful, then a pins come out, you start thinking it's weird again, and then over time you realize, oh wait, no, this is actually somewhat decent. So still, this is a really nice upgrade for him. It just helps his overall usability. And again, I think you guys will see too, especially with the buster resist down of 20% there, on top of his ability to buff strip, he can actually hit really hard for a ruler now. All right, then we get to Akihabara Explosion here. 86E is great for Amakusa? Yes. At least until summer. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Again, I think that's part of the reason they maybe gave Amakusa some attention was basically Abby Summer. Abby Summer was someone that already had AoE charge 50%. She was foreigner, but she also had buff removal on her NP. So I think they just said like, oh shit, that's actually kind of Amakusa's main wheelhouse, so we kind of got to give him something. But okay, so the next up here, we've got Akihabara Explosion, we've got Nero Bride. This is a nice one for Nero Bride. So at this point in time, Castoria has already been dominant for a long time, as of this point on JP. And so just to kind of talk about her, Nero Bride was sort of like the onset of a new era of arts. As she started coming in, we had just had the upgrade to Paracelsus the year before. Largely that was a reason that Bride ends up getting her NP charge on her skill. And then we had also had the upgrade to Tamamo. And so Bride's upgrade there, giving her the 30% charge, really helped usher in a new era. But then out pops Castoria shortly after that, and all of a sudden, Bride's just kind of left in this weird place. Not quite nearly as damage dealing as some of the best damage dealing single target sabers, not quite as supportive as some of the best supporting units. So what they end up doing here, and I really like it, because one of Bride's strengths has always been the ability to choose. So you can put stuff either on herself to make herself perform well, or on another unit to support that unit. So she has that capability of choice, that malleability, that adaptability. So depending on the conditions of the fight, she can shift stuff around. But even regardless of that, basically what they did is they come in here to the third skill and say, hey look, we know Castoria is out, and a lot of people were asking for some sort of buff to make her better than Castoria. And I found that to be really weird. I don't know why anyone wanted better than that, because that would have just increased power creep again, and honestly, not really necessary. So what I was arguing at the time was they should probably find a way to make Bride kind of work with Castoria. And everyone's like, well, she does. And that's true. She definitely already did work with Castoria, but a way in which she stood out that you would want to take her, kind of in the same way like where you want to take Tamamo over just a second Castoria if you need healing, right? So with Bride, they basically come over to her heal and they end up giving it the Sky attribute for 3 turns. So this is a targeted skill already. So basically she can now target a unit and give them Sky attribute for 3 turns of 30%. So a nice 30% power mod against basically anything that's probably divine. So not technically not everything, but still Sky attribute is a pretty nice one to have. So this was just sort of a complementary feature. It allowed you to have a reason to bring Bride in on top of just Castoria. You guys were actually watching me sort of loop the LB4 node for arrowheads there, and I believe the enemy at the end of that is divine. So again, that would be another one where, because I was actually running it with Muramasa, Castoria, and Nero Bride, this is on an A, so we don't have this buff yet, but again, as of that point, yes, all of a sudden this would now make that a much more viable thing. I might be able to do it at a lower MP level. I might be able to pop off a little bit better because of that. Maybe get a little bit more refund due to overkill. So this was another really, really nice one, and I really liked how they again just sort of complemented the already existing art system rather than making her competitive. On top of that, consider as well that this is now something she can apply to herself. So instead of just giving her another NP interlude to help her catch up to some of those better damaging single target sabers, they just gave her a new niche, and that was ideal. So I thought this was a really, really smart buff that they did in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so next up here is going to be the Spring in Full Bloom campaign. This is just sort of a unique sort of banner for like Hokusai and I believe Tamamo, but in this, Hokusai and Chiome get buffs. So Chiome gets her NP interlude here, and she kind of needed it. Chiome is someone that for a long time really just hadn't dealt a lot of damage as a single target assassin. She was arts, and so I think a lot of people understood that, and at least she had the benefit of having really good supports because of that. Basically, they end up taking her NP and they end up upgrading the damage as is normal. Again, she already had the skills heal, but then they add the ability to inflict evil curse status for 3 turns to increase curse damage. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but it's 200%, but it's curse, right? Curse is a big meme. Well, remember too here that they already have, again, the ability to increase damage against enemies that have curse in her kit. So this is just even more curse scaling. She already had the ability with the second skill here to give even more curses. And then again, a charge on the third skill to just help facilitate looping and survivability. So I really just thought, yeah, this is just, you know, even more. It's not only more damage, but it's also just going to make her curses hit harder. So I thought this was a really, really nice one from just the synergy that it already had with the rest of her kit. And that was a really decent buff to give her. Hera very happy? Yes. Skill 1 buff she gets in 2024. Right. Oh, yes. You're sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, she does not get this one just yet. This is one that she recently got. Okay. I'm very happy. Yes. Okay, so next up is Hokusai. This one's an interesting one. This is the buff to Hokusai's third skill. So basically, I'm not sure how I feel about this one. This is very similar to Okida's buff, Shikuchi, and sort of a lot of how you would use Hokusai in the past is there were 2 schools of thought, and basically the way this skill works here is, again, essentially whenever you hit the enemy with an arts card, it puts defense down on them of up to 20%. So some people would say, hey, what if I did like both of Hokusai's arts cards and then her NP into, you know, like the extra attack after? So that would get you a defense down here, a defense down here, and then your NP hits even harder. And then there was the other school of thought where people said, hey, what if I did an NP and then did the arts cards? Yeah, I would only get the defense downs here, but I would get the ability to refund back. And basically Hokusai had very infamously had issues with refund, and so that was one of the ones where a lot of people just had to make this hard choice. But then they end up coming along here and they basically say, hey, not only are we just going to give it a crit star bomb of 15, but we're also going to increase the critical star absorption of arts cards of 3 turns. So to me, even though a lot of people I think were of the opinion that you should pre-card the NP for more damage, this sort of pushes you towards not necessarily having it be an even choice anymore. Because basically by putting it after, you're going to get so much extra here. You've got a star bomb and star absorption. you're going to get so much extra NP gain from that. So you could do this to try to get to an extra overcharge level on her NP if you were to do it before. But to me, this sort of screams, hey, we want to give you a reason to do it after the NP, not necessarily to set yourself up. So in that same sort of way, it's almost the reverse of the Sakuchi buff for Okita. I just feel like they kind of flip-flopped the way that maybe a lot of players thought about it, but still gives you the choice. It's still up to you to decide which way you wish to use it. Neither way is technically wrong, just using the way that best benefits your situation. And so in that regard, it's still not a bad buff. It's still a really, really nice thing that they have in this. And like I said, it's just more options for you. Okay. So then from there, we're now into the FGO Waltz in the Moonlight Lost Belt collaboration summoning campaign. This is another interesting one here. Basically, Helena gets her upgrade to her second skill. Now, if you thought Helena was already a decent support, this makes her an even better damage dealer because she already had 20% charge to the party. What they end up doing to Mahatma here is they end up basically just giving her 30% charge on top of it. So essentially now she's got 20% to the party and 30% extra to herself. Helena Blavatsky becomes a 50% charger. She was already a caster that did really good damage. So I think this is just something that makes her go even more insane. Interestingly enough, it's not too long after this, I believe, that they actually remove her out of the new player summoning pool. So the initial 4-star summon that you get at the beginning of the game, as of right now in NA, you can actually get Helena in that. But I believe it's not too long after this that they go, wait a minute, she's too good now, and they actually yanked her out. So it's sad because that was one of the best units you could realistically start with. Amazing synergy if you pair her with Caskill with high crit star gen buff. Yep. Helena got tired of supporting I'm the damage dealer now. Precisely. Okay, then we also get Jeanne d'Arc's buff, and again, I had already kind of mentioned this with Amakusa, but essentially they came in here, they took one look at this and they said this is trash, and I agree. So is her third skill. I really want the devs to give that one some attention next. Basically, this skill sucked because, one, honestly, you end up in a situation where basically Jeanne d'Arc over a long period of time here has just been used as sort of a stall unit for her NP. She had the ability to invuln the entire party. Now, one, invuln pierce became prevalent, buff stripping became prevalent, so that was a problem, right? But the real issue, I would say, is more that Castoria comes out and then all of a sudden you go like, okay, now we also have another unit that kind of protects the party with their NP. On top of that, Castoria was far more offensive oriented compared to Jeanne's more defensive approach. And I would say even at that point, Jeanne doesn't do a great amount of stuff defensively, and that's something I think they need to look at. They need to make her a better defender for keeping the party alive. So what they do though here is they say, hey, this is just servants. We kind of need to do something about that. So instead it's now any enemy. It doesn't have to be a servant. You can reduce their NP damage. That, again, like I said, not the greatest of deals unless you're going to get hit in between Jeanne's NPs. The problem with this was, though, even then, yeah, you kind of had the issue of, was it really going to be enough? Like, basically, against, one, it had to be a servant, two, it's only a 30% reduction, and with the amount of health your units tended to have back in the day, yeah, it really typically wouldn't have actually still kept you alive unless the enemy's NP was already necessarily pretty weak. But regardless, it now at least applies to everything, not just servants. And then on top of that, it's also going to reduce the target's defense for 1 turn of 20%, and then further reduce the defense for 3 turns of 30%. So for 1 turn, it's a 50% defense down, and for the turns after that, it's 30%. So again, another nice one. I felt like this was good because this sort of speeds up a Jeanne comp. It allows your DPS to actually be able to deal more damage here. And so the slow plodding pace, I would say, of doing a Jeanne stall comp gets massively sped up, and it sort of makes her, one, again, even more complementary with the Castoria, but two, at least able to function in a little bit faster of a pace in comparison to Castoria. Still not the greatest. She still needs some attention, but this definitely was a step in the right direction. Now, hopefully at some point they'll, dear God, address the third skill here. All right. Then we get to Queen Medb. This is actually part of Grail Live now at this point. This is going to be, again, her charge per turn skill. So basically, and we're not going to talk too much about the lore about this. In fact, this actually stirred the pot quite a bit for speculation on LB6 when this buff came out. But basically, they take her debuff immunity of 3 turns, her healing every turn for 3 turns, and her ability to charge her own MP gauge by 10% every turn for 3 turns. And they basically just add to it the ability to charge the NP gauge of male or Fey allies by 30%. Sadly, as of this point, Medb is not a Fey, so you don't have any ability to take advantage of this herself. But this does mean that, yes, somebody else in the party can get some charge, and that may just be a support caster. Again, an Oberon, a Merlin, whoever the hell it is. Both those are male. Both those could benefit from this. And both of them could still be buffing Medb. So I do think this was a decent buff, but I still think the jury's a little bit out on that. And honestly, I think even when this one came out, a lot of people were just like, God, another Medb buff again? So hopefully at some point they maybe kind of look at making her a little bit more, I think, usable over time, especially in comparison to some of her other single target riders. But honestly, I don't think the damage has ever been in doubt about Medb, especially since there's so many male casters out there in the game. Okay, so the next up after that, we get Serenity. And again, this is going to be the buff, I believe, yeah, here to the 3rd skill. So she already had the instant kill success rate here of 3 turns of 50%, and the debuff success rate of 3 turns of 50%. And they end up increasing the arts performance now, adding to it an additional 30% for 3 turns. And then granting her a self on attack activate debuff for 3 turns that inflicts poison basically of 1,000 damage for 3 turns whenever she hits with an arts card. So again, this just says attacking, so the NP would be included in that. You'll know when it doesn't include the NP when it says only when normal attacking. That just means it's carding only, and that becomes a thing. But whenever it's just bland old attacking, it should work for everything. So again, really, really nice in that regard. But yes, I think this was definitely something that Serenity needed. Serenity had kind of always been one of the ones that, at least damage-wise, was underperforming. This actually pulls her right back up into competition with 100 Faces and some of the other single target low star assassins. Ozzy almost kick her ass in the Medb niche. That's Ozzy in general, right? And we'll talk about that. Ozzy right now has a little bit of a leg up on people, but he's going to be coming up in this. All right, and then we get Nitocris's buff. So again, a lot of hubbub lately on JP about Nero Alter, but talking about OG Nitocris, she has never been a bad unit. She's always been an amazing farmer, someone that's got 100% charge in her kit and turns death into not a meme and actually a useful skill. But basically, they actually take the instant kill success skill here, and they, in a sense, give her arts up for 3 turns. So again, this just further out helps her damage. And I think this is something that she kind of needed, because a lot of people were roving around with like an NP1 Nitocris, and it just really didn't do the job unless you were death procking. So naturally, this helped out that issue for her. It's still not going to make her top damage or anything like that for the casters, but it was certainly a welcome addition, because there were several nodes I think that people encountered over time where they just, you know, would be just shy of being able to kill, and it became a problem where you'd have to card and stuff if you failed the death proc. So really, really a nice one there. And then again, it's also a party-wide heal now of 3,000, so really good there. I did like this buff. I thought it was a stellar one for a lot of people that necessarily hadn't used her too much. And then we also get the MHXA NP interlude, and oh boy, was this a doozy. Whenever we talk about MHXA, it, especially on this channel, it almost becomes a bit of a meme where we start talking about how she's actually the best archer in the game. And there's a reason for that, and a lot of that has to do with if you look at her NP here, she deals extra damage to Saber class servant enemies, so she gets a super effective modifier, 150% right there, against Saber class enemies. And she was already someone that was effective, so she basically was at least semi-effective as a berserker, dealing 1.5 times. So again, this just sort of helped close the gap against other archers. But as if that wasn't enough, she gets her NP interlude, which just increases her damage, but then also increases her own damage against good alignment enemies. So she gets a good anti-good power mod of 1 turn of 50%. So Not only does this affect the MP, but it'll also affect any cards after the MP for the duration of that turn. Again, another just really stellar buff for her, but like, honestly, I don't think anyone would say that she needed this. I think it's certainly something for her in the regards that, like, she definitely is a glass cannon. She doesn't have that much survivability, so it's nice to see her pumping out a lot of damage in that regard, but holy cow, this is a tough act to follow, as there are a lot of good alignment sabers out there. So yes, there is quite a bit where she can just double up against the saber class and become just a total utter monster at this point. So again, it's just an insane buff for her there. Okay, then we get to the Camelot pre-release campaign. Now this one's going to be a bit of an interesting one, because logically they can play pretty loose with this. I believe NA has already had the Camelot movie, so I don't know what they're going to call this. Maybe they'll re-release it on Blu-ray. I don't know if they haven't already. They might have. They may just rename it something else, or it may be Camelot Remembrance Campaign or something like that. Who knows? Either way, they basically come through here and they end up giving Bedivere a buff. And this could be a buff to his tactics. And it's kind of an interesting one, because they have been adjusting the tactic skills over time. A lot of them are at really weird, wonky percentages here, as you guys can see, of 16% there. And then again, it gets upgraded to basically party MP damage. So instead of, sorry, it already was party MP damage, but it becomes 3 turns. And so now it gets a flat even 20% for 3 turns, and then also the party's NP gen rate of 3 turns of 30%. So that's another interesting one. I'm gonna say the NP gen is a little bit of a weird one on a Buster unit, and honestly, I kind of agree at that point that, like, I think if I'm gonna be using Bedivere, a unit that has charge in his kit, as a Buster unit, I'm probably gonna be trying to just brute force things. But who knows, maybe you try to take him into a challenge quest and you end up going the distance, so that NP gen buff might actually be nice for you for some reason. Or maybe you're just using some sort of weird hybrid setup where another unit was not Buster and needed it. But still, another nice one there. Shanzang, oh man, this one's a doozy. It's the buff to her second skill, her taunt. So I think in a lot of circles, Shanzang was already someone that was just really, really strong. I think she essentially just had always had the capability of charging 80%, especially now we have the gift of foresight here to know that Appends were coming out after this. So not only that 80% with a maxed mana loading meant that she could go 0 to 100 just under her own power. So really, really strong servant. Somebody that was really used for being able to NP back-to-back times. Her NP itself didn't necessarily hit that hard, but because she had the capability of firing off multiple MPs, because she was a Buster unit and had all the synergy with really good Buster supports for damage, then logically she was naturally a good unit. But they end up taking her taunt here, and basically, you know, what this taunt already did is it reduced the damage taken, so you got a nice 1500 damage cut here, and then again a 1 turn of taunt. A lot of the times this would be used after her NP in conjunction with her third skill that had the NP gain on it to, one, help her refund as much with additional cards after the NP, like if she got some of the arts cards from her triple arts deck here. And then again, then because she was taunting, she would also get hit by the enemies in the follow-up and get even more charge that way. So it would just kind of help her get back to an NP, potentially even loop. But they end up taking this and they end up adding a party-wide charisma for 3 turns of 20%. So not only does this help the rest of the party, this is also going to help her hit even harder. So I remember a lot of people were just like, holy crap, the rich are getting richer now. And this was just a ridiculous buff to give a unit that was, well, maybe not the top of the damage list, a unit that was already kind of the consensus favorite amongst a lot of people for their go-to single target caster. Now, that being said, again, we have the gift of foresight here, and we know Iliya gets a buff. We also know the Buster system is coming, so this buff, in retrospect, makes a lot more sense. And this is why I say, again, whenever we look at buffs, there's a tendency to look at it from our current perspective. Just keep in mind that there's stuff we might not know that the devs do. So they took this opportunity to preemptively buff her, since they were going to be making Iliya a 50% charger with a new 50% charging based system coming out for Buster. So makes perfect sense, but still, Even with the Iliya buff, that does not certainly get rid of the need and capability of Shanzang. She's still a really quality unit, but this certainly helps out, and not only just herself but also the party. All right, then next up here we get Ozzy's first buff of the year. Now this is another interesting one that I saw a lot of people talking about when it happened. So essentially right here we get Ozzy's buff. We're also going to get a Ket's buff as of one of the strengthening campaigns. So a lot of people were like, oh, okay, they're kind of keeping them in neck and neck as they kind of always have. Ozzy and Ket's had relative parity. In fact, I believe their NP numbers were even within like 200 to 500 damage of each other for pretty much the majority of the time of FGO. And so they end up coming in here and buffing his first skill, and they change his charisma to a flat 20%, where again before here it was only 18. They also end up giving him 10 critical stars every turn on Sunlight Battlefield for 3 turns, and party crit damage on Sunlight Battlefield for 3 turns of 30%. So again, nothing crazy, but still a nice tweak to his charisma. Certainly helped his damage a little bit. But, you know, obviously everyone's like, oh, okay, well, that's a nice thing. You know, he can maybe function with Gawain and stuff like that. As long as he's on the Sunlight Battlefield, he's good, right? But he might not always be on the Sunlight Battlefield. He can't bring the sun. Just wait. We'll get back to that in a bit. So, next up then we get Tristan here. This is part of the Holy Grail Front, My Super Camelot. This is not the Camelot movie campaign. This is the Grail Front. And again, since we have the Gift of Foresight here, we now know why Tristan got this buff. Similarly here, we now know why Artoria got this buff. So we'll talk about this, but let's take a look. So again, Tristan gets the buff here to his Harp of Healing. Again, Harp of Healing's already been a strong skill. A lot of people are familiar with it from David. Again, it's just the ability to allow the party to have evasion for 1 attack. It's unexpiring. There's no duration on that, but it does stick there, and that can, you know, just that 1 evasion might allow you to just get right through an enemy's NP. So still a really nice thing to have. It also does a little bit of healing and removes the party's mental debuffs. Now, again, this doesn't just mean every single like stun or anything. This is actually terror. Again, this is actually confusion, not skill seal. So keep in mind, it's only mental debuffs, and there are some differences between them. But it gets upgraded, and all of a sudden, Tristan gets his first steroid ever in that he's ever had. He's never had a steroid prior to this point. Everything about Tristan's kit was always just raw damage. And so a lot of people looked at him and thought like, oh, well, he doesn't do that great of damage. But the reality was Tristan scaled really well then with any type of buff that he got, because he didn't have any additional increase to his damage output. So finally he gets a quick up of 3 turns here of 30%, and people are like, wow, holy crap, Tristan does good damage now. He still does, but I think again with the Gift of Foresight here, we see what was coming up on the horizons. This was actually just straight up a preemptive buff to make him sort of, 1, be in parity with Baobon, who's coming out later, and 2, not to make Baobon look relatively insane compared to him. If he didn't have this quick buff, Baobon would have just absolutely trounced him. So it would have been like, wow, holy crap, what are you doing, right? So again, this definitely makes a whole lot more sense now since we can look ahead. They also increased the amount of healing done from the paltry, I think it was 600 that it was. Yep, 600 here at rank 10, up to 1,000. So still not the greatest amount, but hey, I'll take it. And again, it's certainly a welcome thing for Tristan. Okay, and then we get Artoria. This is the buff to her mana loading. Now, again, sorry, mana burst. I keep saying mana loading. Logically, guys, this one's my waifu. I feel the need to disclose that to everybody watching on the stream, to everybody watching on YouTube later. This is my waifu. I naturally have a lot to say about her. That being said, we're going to try to keep it as short as possible. This mana burst is what gets upgraded, and it was again a buster up of 1 turn of 50% on a 5-turn cooldown. It becomes Torrent of Light A, and basically it stays the same on the mana burst aspect of it, but it now gets 2 power mods. It increases again trait damage against chaotic alignment and evil alignment enemies here for 1 turn of 50% each. So this means that they are separate and they can be combined, so you could get a chaotic evil enemy and thus that becomes 100% power mod as a result. So really nice upgrade there. I had some people basically when this came out sort of kind of trying to say this was a bad buff. Now, just talking about it here for a second, I definitely see that they're trying to keep her a little bit in line with OG Artoria. They didn't want to make her a 3-turn duration, and I get that. But this is a little bit of a weird one, and I do agree with some of those people. I'm not going to say it's a bad buff, though. It is still a great buff, and there are certainly units both as, again, archers or even berserkers that she can exploit this on. And as a result, I've had people tell me that this was stupid and again, bad. And literally right after this, the very first lotto after this, I immediately got to use her against an archer in one of the nodes. So I ultimately just said, like, I mean, again, is it actually bad, or is it just up to the devs to actually give you a node to be able to use it? And sure enough, they did. And it's not the only time they have. I have used her at several points in lottos now at this point because of this. So not a bad buff. But I think what a lot of people were looking for, and the thing I am still looking for on Artoria, is going to be her NP interlude. And we definitely see that the reason they felt the need to do this, the reason they felt the need to up this for her, is because of the buffs coming to Ereshkigal and the existence of a new unit coming down the line, Melissan. I'm not going to get into that too much here. I already talked about that in the banner review video. Some people got on to me for it. Again, I want everyone to understand I do not hate Melissan, but I have pointed out before that I really feel like the devs overstepped with her capabilities and talked about how, particularly in that third skill, for instance, they could have actually cut it down to only 50% charge and it would still have the same effect it does right now. So the fact that it does 100% charge is actually kind of nutty. But still, irregardless, Melissan's existence upcoming and the probably already known buff to Ereshkigal, probably what caused this buff to happen right here. And so I'm fine with it. I think it does help her sort of keep pace a little, but yeah, honestly, at this point in time on JP, Artoria is in kind of dire need of an upgrade just to keep pace with things. So that is her buff there. Then we get to the Summer 5 rerun, and oh man, I just kind of wanted to take a moment here to point out that I hypothesized last year that Fujino might get a banner early on NA, a year early, because she showed up on the second run of Summer 5 on JP. She showed up on the first run of Summer 5 for NA, and I kind of predicted that happening, and it did happen. And I told people, I was like, you probably want to roll then rather than this year, because this year is way more likely to be somewhere in the middle of all of the LB6 and or anniversary stuff that people are going to be trying to roll. Not only that now, but now we also have Pity, and Pity is going to have weird effects on the 4-star, so that's probably going to be a triple SR rate up banner that she's going to be on later this year. You would have definitely been better off to roll last year, but again, there's nothing you can do about that now. If you really want her, go for her. But that being said, this is going to be Fujino's NP interlude, and it is a nice one. So again, Fujino was someone that she'd always been pretty decent for challenge content, but not necessarily the strongest in damage. And so they take her her NP that dealt damage and already inflicted buff block status 1 time 3 turns, and basically turn it into even more damage and still the buff block, but now also an extra overcharge effect here that increases her damage against super large enemies. So another super effective modifier here against super large. So really nice one. This does mean that, yeah, it's sort of niche damage being put in here, but certainly against the right type of enemy, yeah, she can really hit hard. And so that is a really nice one for her, as it gives her not only her challenge applications, but also some potential applications where you're just facing a super large saber or berserker, and all of a sudden Fujino's your girl. Okay, then we get to the Avalon Le Fay Lost Belt release. I am not gonna go into some of these, but I will talk again at least about what the upgrade is. So Gareth just gets an upgrade to her battle continuation here, and as you guys can see, she gets the basically the self guts of 1 time 3 turns with more HP. She gets the increase of critical damage of 3 turns of 50% here. And then again, the crit stars added here of 20. Now again, Lancers don't have the worst star weight in the world, but not the best ones either. So they're not archers in that regard amongst the knight classes. They tend to have the better ones, but Still, certainly a welcome thing. Gareth is someone that I've always felt like has been a more offensive oriented tank, so I do like this. I think this is actually just going to help her card a little bit better, and it was certainly a welcome buff to be received to her at the time. All right, then we get into August now, and we are in the Prisma Iliya Licht movie release campaign. So this is another really interesting one, I would say. Honestly, I don't know when we're going to get this campaign. I don't know how we're going to get this campaign. They may not actually give us the movie on NA. They may not call it the same thing. For all intents and purposes, this might be your back to school campaign upcoming this year. I don't know. Someone remind themselves in a couple months and see if I'm actually right on that, but we'll see, right? This could be any number of things. Regardless, I can almost guarantee you're going to get it. Why? Not just because it's a banner for 2 fairly rare limited units, but also because it's their upgrades. So yeah, no matter what they do, they're gonna give this to you somehow. So don't worry about missing it. Anyways, Iliya gets, or sorry, not Iliya, Miyu gets her NP interlude here, and it is certainly a welcome one as well. As again, we look at this and you guys could see she already had the issue basically of dealing 3,000 damage without killing herself. Now, she also had, a lot of people would call her Miniature Merlin, and I didn't really feel like she kind of was, but she does have some similar aspects to her NP. But basically, as she gets the NP interlude, she gets the ability to increase party attack 3 turns every turn for 3 turns. So it's 10% at NP1, 20% at NP5. And so what that means is every turn, assuming it's just NP1, basically if you pop this NP, you get 10%, you get 10%, and you get 10%. So basically it's stacking there, and then by the 3rd turn you would have again 30% attack up just from 1 NP. So what a lot of people did, and I saw some crazy stuff where they were just stacking like double Miyu and just generating a crap ton of attack power and just laughing at things. So really funny in that regard, but still I really like this. And then again, she also gets the ability to recover the party's HP every turn for 3 turns of, again, up to 2,000, but base of 1,000. The reason this is nice is because of the 3-turn duration base 1,000. Not only would this have offset her old demerit here, but again, essentially they upped the amount by doing this and they got rid of the demerit. So you won't really see it here, but yes, that is what happened. They got rid of the nasty demerit where she just damaged herself, because a lot of people criticize that. A lot of people were just like, what the fuck is the point of a healer who's going to kill themselves? And she didn't, but certainly it was an issue where, yeah, with this currently on at the 500 there, you were only healing half of her own self demerit. So every time you impede, you were taking a hit herself. And so a lot of people just complained it just made her very hard and difficult to use without some other healer in the party. And I agree. I honestly think that was a true statement. Then we get to Iliya's buff to her, I believe it's her 3rd skill. Oh no, sorry, her 2nd. Again, this is her self-invincibility and her NP gen rate of 3 turns here of 28%. And now it gets changed into also having a 50% charge skill on a 6-turn cooldown. This means in a double Koi and Sky setup, you can pop the skill on turns 1 and 3. So definitely get some double action going there, some extra usability out of it. But this is certainly a welcome buff to a lot of Iliya fans, because it just allowed her to actually be a 3-turner. It allowed her to actually really pop off. And as of this point, yes, you will already have Koyanskaya and Oberon out. You will already have the Append system out. So a lot of people celebrated upon receiving this, because it actually just sort of ushered Iliya into the new era and just allowed her to be far more useful because of that. Okay, then we get to the Halloween trilogy, and this is a long one with a lot of buffs. Now, again, the Halloween trilogy was an event where it was sort of like a main interlude. They brought back all the old Halloween events up through year 3, and then gave it a little bit of a new story to tie it all together, and then segued that into the new Halloween story. But in the process, once you got to the new Halloween event, you also got the ability to gain all of your old welfares. And then even then, sorry, I literally just pointed to the one who's not a welfare. And then they also ended up buffing OG Ellie as well. So let's go ahead and start right here. Again, both the Mecha Ellies here get an upgrade to their charge skill, but it's not necessarily what you're thinking. So they already had the ability to charge 20% and deal 500 damage to themselves. Instead, none of that gets adjusted, and they just add a 25 crit star bomb. That is a lot. Now, I think the one criticism I would have this is naturally because of the way the buster systems work, getting extra crit stars is not that big of a deal. Certainly, yes, we can definitely, you know, crit harder at times because of this, but yeah, it's certainly not a requirement by any means. So again, that was a nice thing to add. It's definitely going to help their card performance, but still not the thing I think I would have asked for them. But again, that was both of them, so they both ended up getting the same upgrade. You don't have to worry about there being any difference. All right, then we get Caster Liz, and Caster Liz is somebody that I think for a long time, even as a welfare, she just had very pitiful damage. She's a unit that you could have gotten to NP5, and even then the NP5 damage was just really sad. Part of this is because she's one of arguably the first welfare in the game. A lot of people would tell you Saber Lily is actually first, but Saber Lily is a little weird because Saber Lily doesn't use the same like welfare currency for actually ascending. Saber Lily just uses normal ascension mats, and part of that's because they gave Saber Lily out to people as a pre-sign-up bonus for FGO back in the day. So they just designed Saber Lily like a normal unit. Albeit they kind of scuffed her attack power, but it is what it is. Either way, they kind of did the same thing with Liz here in terms of the attack power. She's just not really got that much overall damage potential. But they end up coming through here and end up buffing again her third skill here, performance continuation A. It was a self guts of 1 time 5 turns, still decent coverage with the turns there of 2500 HP with 8 crit stars. And they end up adding an NP charge to it of 30% and allowing it to have spread fire status for 5 turns to all enemies. And spread fire is just going to increase the amount of damage that a burn does to them by 100%. So it's going to double that. Nice buff. I think the biggest issue I ultimately have with this is they left the cooldown right where it was. And it's probably because it's a gut skill. The problem with this is on a 7-turn cooldown, that basically means you ain't 3-turning with her, not without some extenuating circumstances. So essentially you can 3-turn with her, but it's not easy and you're kind of going to be brute forcing it. It's going to be a double Oberon setup, not a double Koyanskaya setup. And that's kind of, I think, the sad part about that. But still, definitely a nice buff. It does increase her usability, just not her damage. And that, well, it increases her fire damage, but not her actual MP damage, something she kind of needs pretty badly. Then we get OG Ellie here, and again, this is going to be the buff to her defense down here, her torture technique. So she already had the ability to reduce one enemy's defense by 20% for 3 turns, and then she also instead gets reduce all enemies' defense for 3 turns, so not just one. Then removes 1 latest buff from all of them. So whichever the most recent buff is on the enemy, it will remove. And then again, it's going to skill seal them for 1 turn. So this can be a really, really nice challenge type deal. I think the biggest issue for Ellie is just kind of staying up down a stretch and just her overall performance over time. She does have a guts here, but still definitely a nice one for her to have. I think the biggest issue that I have, she like kind of is a vampire, kind of doesn't have vampirism, so not really the exact same thing there, but still I would have liked for them to actually sort of lean into that a little bit more. Still, I think this is a really nice quality buff for her because it's not only going to increase her damage against the entire enemy wave, but it's also just going to allow her to maybe even potentially set up another unit. Yeah, she is a dragon, exactly. Okay, then we get to Brave Liz, and oh my god, this might be the entire worst buff of the year, and I'm going to explain to you why. So Brave Liz gets a buff to her 3rd skill. They took a look at this skill. They said, okay, hey, everybody hates this skill because we drain 100% of the gauge, and it's totally fucking RNG as to how it works. And they said, I know, we'll buff it by making it only drain 50%. So they just halved the demerit. That is the stupidest thing they could have done. I'm going to be honest here and say that, honestly, they could have just made it so that, like, I don't know, maybe the party attack was RNG but everything else was guaranteed on pop and gotten rid of the entire demerit, and this would still not be an OP skill. It would be nice, it would be RNG, but yeah, they could have gotten rid of so many of the other bad parts of this. So this gets a pretty much failing grade for a buff. It's so short-sighted, they just still do not understand this, and this skill is still pretty much worthless. So unless you're just going to start her out with starting charge and charge her even more and then use this skill, I just really don't see the point of it. It's just not what she needed, and it doesn't help her really. Okay, then we get to oh wow, Mao Nobu here with Guda Guda rerun. So Guda Guda is another nice one, not only because we're gonna have raids there, but also because Mao Nobu is gonna be getting this buff. And this buff, again, as you guys can see here, is the buff to her third skill. So her third skill was already a 20% charge skill, and I told you Mao Nobu's case, be careful who you make fun of in high school, because all of a sudden not only is she mommy level, but she's also really strong. So to all the tier list makers who assigned her a D rank, enjoy, as she is now your new damage queen amongst the Avengers, basically able to just insanely pop off. Because what they do here is they give her a 30% charge skill. Means she can start from 50% with a double Koyan Skya and Oberon setup. She can really pop off with a maxed mana loading and this 30% charge, because it's all on a 5-turn cooldown. She is going to get it back, and it's also going to increase buster performance on a burning battlefield for 3 turns of 30%. And she already had the capability here of applying burning battlefield for 3 turns. So yes, this is not only a stellar damage buff that can be overlapped with itself because of the short cooldown, but it also allows her to 3-turn with a much better system due to the fact that it's 30%. So yes, this absolutely changes things for Mao Nobu. Everybody that was making fun of her before for low damage, honestly, I still would say that yes, Mao Nobu wasn't the best designed on release, but she certainly was not worthy of the hate that she got, and she definitely has the ability to be a good unit even back then. Certainly these buffs have really helped her out in that regard. Okay, then we get to Skadi now at the end of the year. Now again, this is not the last buff, this is just the last of the miscellaneous ones. We still have the strengthenings to go through, the actual strengthening campaigns, but this is Skadi's NP interlude. This is a weird one. I've talked about this before. Honestly, I have kind of criticized this buff in the past, and I'll explain why. So she already had the ability to increase critical damage of 3 attacks for 5 turns for the party, again of a base of 30%. She granted the party an evasion of 1 attack for 3 turns and grants the party instant kill immunity of 1 time 3 turns. Now, she also has a damage cut here of 500. A lot of people have pointed out that this is a very weak NP. I'm going to say this about it. Skadi was the very first support caster I had on JP. When I started playing, she came out like right after that, like a month later, and she was the only thing I had at the time. She certainly is not weak from the standpoint of that 1 attack 3 turns dodge can keep you alive. I can criticize it and say it's not Harp of Healing and it shouldn't have a duration, but it does. I can also criticize it and say that this upgrade should have given it an extra evasion, but it didn't. So that is definitely one of my issues with it. However, she does get the ability to increase the party's attack not for 3 turns, but for 5. And it's a base of 20%. And you might be wondering why. So they also buff the crit damage here of, again, it's 3 attacks, 5 turns, but it's now 50%. So I think what they looked at with Skadi is that people were kind of saying, hey, you know, not only do we not really need crit damage in a Skadi system because she already provides so much, but we don't really have a reason to roll for a higher MP level. And I think they looked at that and they said, we need to address this. We need to give people reasons to roll for more MP levels of even our support units. So I can't get onto them for that so much as they just added a whole extra feature to the gimmick of grabbing an NP level. And on top of that, it's a weird one because the way the Skadi system works, it works basically with what I like to call block 50 charges. And that means that Skadi herself only has 50% charge. She can't break it up in any way. She can't hand it to multiple units. So that means she can't benefit from it herself either, unless she just targets herself. So, and if she does that, that means your damage dealer's not getting the benefit. So it becomes a little bit of a weird issue of trying to get Skadi to her NP. And if you consider the aspect of, yes, hey, maybe I could, then all of a sudden this actually does look like a good NP buff. So that's where I've said, like, well, yes, I will criticize this now in the moment. I don't think this is what Skadi needed. I don't think this helped her too much. In fact, again, even just with the instant kill immunity of 1 time 3 turns, there are other units out there that just flat out have better instant kill immunity and resistances. So I think they basically could have taken a look at every single aspect of this NP and upgraded it. And they kind of didn't do that. They just added a new thing and increased probably the thing that needed the upgrade the least, which was the party crit damage. So I can criticize that then, but I can also say a future may come in which there is a new quick support that actually does have party-wide charge, that actually does maybe give charge per turn and healing and stuff like that, maybe like Merlin. If that's the case, then no, this is actually a pretty good buff. And so this is something where, like I said, right now it looks dumb. It looks like it's something that can't really be easily taken advantage of, you know, short of, again, you know, throwing on a K-scope or something like that on her. But it is something that down the stretch could be very, very viable and very useful, just depending on what they do with Quick. So again, maybe that's copium, but maybe they actually do end up addressing Quick by giving it more viable and adaptable supports, especially for challenge content. And all of a sudden, she would look good here with this. So again, it's an interesting buff to say the least. All right, chat. Now we get to the Servant Strengthening Quest Part 13. These are supposed to happen in April. Again, I don't know when exactly that'll occur. They may move this around some. It may get squished in with something else. It just depends on what they're trying to do with the schedule. But one thing I can say here is that, again, just taking a note of both this and where is it? Right here. Yes. And then again, session 14 right here for the Strengthening Quest. These are the only 2 Strengthening Quest like campaigns that actually occur the entire year. In fact, as of next year, JP has only had 1, and it was the anniversary. So they're doing less and less and less actual strengthening campaigns and doing far more of these miscellaneous ones like you saw, where they're just tied into the event. That's kind of been an interesting thing to see, is they're not lumping them together anymore. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about them. So for day 1 here, we've got Vlad's NP interlude. Now, as of this point, Vlad already had an NP interlude. This first interlude made him normal damage because Vlad's original damage output was actually scuffed for a single target arts unit. They kind of kept him down. He was a day 1 servant, and they just, I think they were really afraid of a really strong arts berserker at the time. So they kept his scaling down, and then that first NP interlude actually just made him finally normal scale after years. This is the second NP interlude, and this happens right after Akihabara explosion. A lot of people were like, oh, holy shit. You know, Vlad's dead because here comes Galatea. And then here comes the actual second buff to his NP, and they go like, oh, they just killed Galatea. Now, neither of those 2 statements was true. Vlad wasn't dead, and neither was Galatea. People just like to knee-jerk react to things. That being said, this is certainly a really, really good buff. As again, you guys can see, they had already upgraded the damage that he deals, but also the crit stars. Then he gets this one right here that we're actually talking about, where he gets another damage upgrade that makes him actually finally have an NP interlude after being a day 1 servant in the game. He's also going to apply arts resist down of 20% for 3 turns after the damage goes out. So still a really, really nice thing there. And then again, I think this is just going to help him not only with his looping, but also just outright damage potential. Certainly a welcome buff for Vlad. Certainly shut up a lot of the haters about him as well. So I really like this one for him, and it is a nice thing to see him finally get his time in the sun a little bit. Okay, so then for our next one here, we've actually on day 2 got Rama's NP interlude. This was another sort of necessary one. Similar to the Vlad situation, you had now Watanabe come out, and Watanabe had sort of stolen Rama's thunder as being a better Rama in some degrees. Honestly, I'm gonna say that Watanabe was not nearly as good of a critter as Rama, but certainly had a lot better, I'd say, power mods and stuff in his kit. Well, Rama ends up getting his NP upgrade here that just not only increases the damage, but also reduces bust of resistance by 20% for 3 turns after the damage goes out, and then also drains demonic enemies' NP gauges by 1. And this is good because it's demonic, not demon. Demonic is, again, a much wider niche than demon. If you want to know the difference, anything that's demonic is demonic. Anything that's a demon is literally just the actual demon enemies, and there's a couple others included in that, but it's a much smaller niche. So if you want another crazy example of what is demonic, it's probably easier to determine what isn't in terms of fodder enemies that you'll fight, because frankly, even the crabs that you fight to drop seashells are considered demonic, which is crazy to me. But again, then he also deals extra damage to demonic enemies, something that he already did. It's a really, really nice, super effective modifier. But yes, certainly this was a welcome addition to Rama. Just kind of helped him keep pace basically with Watanabe, who had shown up and already like one-upped him. Okay, then on day 3 here, we get the buff to Regend, and it was legendary. So it's his fade out skill, his second skill here. Again, it just was a cleanse of mental debuffs and a crit star bomb before. Then now he gets an on self activate. Sorry, now it's all debuffs, not just mental. And then he gets a grant self on attack activate debuff for 3 turns that whenever he uses a quick card, he inflicts quick resist down of 10% for 3 turns to them on top of the star bomb that he already got. And considering the cooldown of the skill was already low at 4 turns, this is actually kind of a pretty nutty upgrade that they got for him. So certainly if you're sitting there soloing something with Regend, you can actually have some real fun now with it. Okay, then for day 4, Ketz gets her buff. And remember what I talked about there with Ozzy earlier. Ketz gets a buff to her charisma. She already had the party-wide attack of 21%, so she was already above average with that. And then on top of that, they just gave her a nice easy crit star bomb of 25. I'm going to be honest and say that, yeah, considering the buster systems and the way they work, probably not the most necessary thing, but at the time, we didn't know about those systems. This was before they came out. So definitely a interesting buff to say the least, and I think this was a well-received one. Now, after the fact, I'm not sure how well it is, considering we have Stars Abound in a buster system, but hey, she is a writer. She's going to be able to soak all of them, and still, even then, she does have her third skill here that increases her crit star absorption. So I'd say this sort of made her an all-in-one crit unit where she has stars, crit, damage, and crit absorption. So basically, she could do all 3, and that definitely helped her out in that regard. Just kind of put her out on an island again and made her a much more devoted sort of unit for that sort of thing. Okay, so day 5 here, we've got Yang King's NP interlude, and oh man, he needed this. Yang King has been someone, aka Mr. Fister, has been somebody that has been just sort of maligned for a long time. He's never been that bad, honestly, but he's never been that good either, is sort of his issue. A lot of this just has to do with the fact that a lot of his skills over time had just really been just focused on critical star manipulation, and some of them aren't even that good, but he's definitely gotten a lot of buffs in that regard. And then now he gets an NP interlude, and basically increases the amount of damage he does, reduces the quick resistance after their NP by 20% for 3 turns, and then increases his own critical damage of 50% for 3 turns. So definitely going to help him follow up there with that in regards to his capability to manipulate stars and being able to crit hard. So I do like that. It was a relatively nice buff for him, and it definitely started to pull him in line with a lot of the other 4-star assassins at that point. Okay, then day 6 here, we get Moriarty, and oh man, this is a good one. Moriarty's somebody, I think we could say that in general, a lot of the single target archers at this point just need buffs. The AoE archers have received a lot of buffs over time. We've got, again, units like MHXA, MHXX, MHX that have kind of been encroaching on the archer's main niche for a while. But even regardless of that, I'm going to say that your single targets just have not gotten a whole lot of love. Well, Moriarty has gotten some. But essentially what this does is this upgrade is going to remove the biggest issue with Moriarty's kit. So just taking a look here at the second skill here, this is not the upgrade that he got. Basically, he had the ability to charge his own gauge by 50%, but it can only be used when there are 10 crit stars or more, and it was consuming the crit stars. Then he got an upgrade that basically removed the consumption, but still the requirement was that you had to have 10 crit stars. Honestly, not a big issue nowadays, especially with the buster systems, but at the time, remember, we didn't know. So what this upgrade does is it takes his ignore invincibility skill and adds a crit star bomb to it. So this addressed already the biggest glaring issue in his kit. He now had stars on demand within his own kit, so the fact that his second skill required stars no longer mattered. You could basically just say, okay, I can pop that skill, boom, there you go, I've got it. So, and again, you don't have to now, considering the other things. So if you wanted to save the invincibility pierce for another turn, you certainly could, because you do have Coin Sky and Oberon that both have star bombs. On top of this, this also adds the ability to ignore defense for one turn. So this does make him really, really nice. It allows him to shred quite a bit here. There's not a whole lot of defense pierce amongst our archers. So certainly a nice thing for Moriarty to have, and another way for him to stand out. Again, he's another buster unit, and like we had pointed out already, his 50% charge skill, it is on a 6-turn cooldown, so you can double that one up. Still, really, really nice upgrade for Moriarty. And then we get to day 7 here, and it's funny because I actually called this one at the time. I still remember it, that the last one we knew was a gold Lancer. I believe we knew it was a 4-star, and they were revealing them over time. So a lot of people were hypothesizing as to who it is going to be, and I was like, I bet it's Alter. And the reason I said it was like, I bet it's Alter. I bet they're going to pull her out. She's only going to be available that one final day of the banner rotation, and that'll be that. Sure enough, it was. And that's exactly what they did. Alter hadn't had a lot of banners over time. I don't even know if she has one after this point, but still, yes, that is a thing. And they ended up pulling her in there and giving her her own day to be able to be rolled. So that was certainly nice in that regard. I don't know how they will handle this one with regards to pity, so be careful on that. But still, this is another nice upgrade for her. And kind of like we saw with Arthur, instead now we end up getting an upgrade from a mana burst that was 1 turn. And ironically enough, Alter is someone that actually has a really strong one at 55%. They changed it to Breath of the Red Dragon EX. And so what this one's going to do is it's going to be 3 times 3 turns now. I'm going to be honest here and say I hate this. And the reason I hate this is, while I do like that it's 3-turn duration, I find the need to put a limit on it just stupid. I don't get it anymore. I think DW needs to stop putting these sorts of things, these sorts of artificial limitations on skills. They're just not fun. Let people card lock, let people meme if they really want to. I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world at this point. It's hard to pull that stuff off anyways, because you have to be able to shuffle the cards to get the right thing. So there's still an element of RNG. And I think this is just kind of dumb that they keep really, really restricting units. But still, I will definitely take it over nothing. So that means you get the ability to be able to be double the skill up with a double Coin Sky setup, but you're probably not going to be running double Coin Sky with her, because again, while she does finally get a charge skill here of 20%, it is tied to her steroid and it's only 20%. So it means if you want to be 3-turning with her, you can do it, but you're probably starting out at full charge and you're probably working with double Oberon in order to get this to work. So not the most ideal of setups, but still, it does allow people that really like Alter to be able to 3-turn with her, and she still will hit very hard, given that she was already an insane 4-star in that regard. Okay, and so then that's that for that servant campaign. And then we get to, again, campaign 14 that we were already talking about. This is the actual anniversary campaign. So this one doubles up. There are 2 each day, and we're going to fly right through them. So the first one up here is going to be Lily, and it's her intuition. Her instinct, sorry. Her instinct is, again, they've been going through the game trying to upgrade a lot of the instincts and get rid of them over time, and I'm happy they have, because instinct is one of the most underwhelming skills. It's not terrible, it's just not in any way, shape, or form really interesting. And so they take her star bomb and they upgrade it to give her, instead of 14 crit stars, it's now 15. and it's also a 20% charge. So just like we had mentioned there with Lalter, you can 3-turn with her now. It's just not the greatest thing because honestly, Lily's damage isn't the greatest in general, but certainly you would be able to pop off, especially on a turn 3 with Oberon setup. And then it's also going to increase her own healing received for 3 turns, which is a little bit of an interesting upgrade. Not really sure why they went with this, because it's not actual healing, it's just increasing the healing received. So the only thing I can think of is, again, they came down here and said, okay, hey, you know, the heal effect on the NP, that's why. So I'm okay with it. It's just kind of a interesting thing. I'm surprised they didn't just give her another steroid, honestly. But still, I do like this. This does make Lily a lot more usable. And again, I feel like I should probably bring this up since we're talking about her. A lot of people have negative connotations about Lily. They look at her attack power and they see it as really low. Do keep in mind, a lot of those perceptions sort of persist from year 1 of the game. If you see people trash talking her, a lot of them haven't actually used her, and they totally forget that, again, not only does she have a really nice mana burst still in her kit as a steroid, but they also forget that she's had an NP interlude, something that's pretty rare for a welfare. And that NP interlude has definitely helped out her damage. She is quite capable for a lot of people. Also, considering the fact that you can now roll her in the FP pool, yeah, you shouldn't sleep on Lily if you've got people telling her that, or got people telling you that she's bad, and you're sitting there with only like 3-star units. All right, so next up is going to be Mozart, and this is going to be his second skill here, his artistic aesthetic. Again, sort of like with John, the ability to reduce one servant's NP damage for 1 turn. Kind of annoying, kind of restrictive. They end up changing it to 1 enemy as well, also reducing their arts resistance for 1 turn of 20%, and reducing, or sorry, 3 turns of 20%, and then reducing their critical attack chance of 3 turns. So this again just sort of works really well with Mozart. He was already someone that you kind of wanted to bring in, buff the party, and then rotate right back out. So a lot of people used him for his 50 crit star bomb as well on his 3rd skill. A really nice way to get just crit stars immediately in a party. But again, it is what it is. I think this just sort of further helps Mozart be both the buffer and or debuffer that he kind of always has been, the really decent 1-turn support unit. Okay, then we get to the second day, and oh look, it's our good old buddy, our old pal Ozymandias. So we already talked about Ozzy's charisma, and you guys saw how, like, oh yeah, hey, remember that that allowed him to get extra buffs when he was on Sunlight Field, but he didn't have the ability to bring the sun, as we like to call it. And then he gets an NP interlude, and what does he do? He brings the sun. So now he basically gives himself Sunlight Battlefield buff for 5 turns. So yes, all of those effects from before now will always apply as long as he's NP. He deals damage to 1 enemy. Again, that's been increased by the NP interlude. He always NP sealed them, but now he brings the sun, and he also reduces his own skill cooldowns by 1. Something that is frankly really interesting in a Koyanskaya world where she already reduces the skill cooldown. So the fact that he does it again, man, there's some really crazy stuff you can do with Ozzy in this regard, and it's kind of funny to see. So a lot of the reason that Ozzy now sits at the top of the Rider class just because he's one of the few single targets that's actually had an NP interlude. That's why he's so strong, but it's also, yes, he's just gotten some really nice buffs that we're going to be getting upcoming this year. Hopefully at this point, again, 7.2 is coming out tomorrow as of me recording this, so maybe I get to change my stance on Kets, and maybe she gets a nice upgrade that that we might be able to predict, but who knows? We'll just have to wait and see in that regard. Okay, and then we got Matahari's again Star Jin skill here, Espionage. That gets upgraded basically to increase the party's critical star generation rate for 3 turns, up from just her own of 30% to now the party of 100%. So it's a huge buff that she gets here. And then increases the party's critical damage of 3 turns of 50%. Honestly, I'm a-okay with this. Matahari is someone that she's always been niche as all hell. She's been a really, I'd say, kind of difficult to use unit. Not because she's actually hard, but because like you have to find situations where like you can actually get away with using her in a lot of cases. Still, definitely a really nice upgrade for her. I think this is something that is certainly worth in regards to her. Okay, then we get to day 3 here. We've got the Yuri Pirates. This is their gut skill now that they finally needed. So again, if you guys were unaware, the Yuri Pirates, again, you guys can see here, Voyage was just the ability to increase critical star generation rate for 3 turns. You get Docking Assault now, and basically it's again obviously going to be the critical star generation rate, but not only that, but their own NP generation rate of 30%, the ability to taunt themselves for 1 turn, and a gut status 1 time 3 turns with 1 HP. This is ideal. Normally you might be upset about it only being a 1 HP guts, but remember, with regard to the Yuri Pirates, they deal more damage the less health they have. So a lot of people were resorting to like Chengonging them. The taunt might help as well if you don't want to do something like that. But yeah, the issue at play there was because they didn't have a guts. You had to find some other way to put a guts on them if you wanted to do that. Now you don't need to. It's just part of their kit. So this was a really welcome buff that they gave him. I thought it was a very smart buff, a very in tune with how people are actually using the servant type of buff. So I thought this was a great one for them, and I think this actually really helps the Yuri Pirates get used. Okay, then we got Hassan. Now take everything that I just said about the Yuri Pirates and throw it in the trash with regards to the upgrade to Hassan's NP. I definitely like the fact that they wanted to upgrade Hassan's NP. He needed it. His damage was not that good, and certainly while he is survivable, I'd say honestly the Heaven's Feel movies do him a little bit of better justice in that regard. But still, looking at this, they increase the amount of damage that he deals. Now the issue at play here comes into the latter half of this. So basically he has the chance to instant kill, and it does activate first. It's an 80% chance, but again, remember, death is sort of a meme. It doesn't work like how you think it does. That's just one part of the formula. But again, they add this little line here of if instant kill succeeds, it grants the self the 2 buffs below. So it'll increase his own attack by 20% for 3 turns. It'll charge his own NP gauge 50%. Honestly, the way I criticized this is that I said this should probably be what applies when he fails to actually kill. He should kind of get the ability to like charge back and be like, I'm gonna do it again, right? Like, oh, you think you're gonna stop me? I'm tenacious. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep grasping at that heart. Now, that being said, interestingly enough, I think what they could have done is they could have done it in a dual way. Now looking at this, they could have basically said if it succeeds, he gets 20% up. If it fails, he gets 50% gauge to get back and do it again. But still, I digress. That's probably, they probably would have said like, hey, yeah, giving a unit 50% gauge every single time they NP, probably a little strong. And in that regard, definitely a thing. But I still think this is a little bit of a weird one. While it is nice if he does death proc, I think death can be rare enough unless you're dealing with trash mobs that really it's probably you're not going to see the benefit of this too often. So still a interesting buff. He certainly is welcome to the damage, I'm sure, but the rest of it definitely a little bit hard to pull off. All right, then we get to day 4 here. We get Cersei's much needed NP interlude. She already had the ability to pigify people, as you guys know, and not only does she get the damage increase, but she also gets the ability to remove the target's offensive buffs now. So another nice way to stand out from her other single target caster contemporaries. I think this is a again, good buff for her in that regard, especially for a unit that frankly didn't do that much damage before. This helps that damage issue out, and it's also going to give her a reason to be used over maybe some of the more powerful ones. And then we get Leonidas's guts here. So again, he already had a one-time over 5 turns guts of 2500 HP. And then basically now he gets the sort of quality of life that a lot of the other guts based units have, where it is now stackable with other guts. Then it grants himself an on activate buff for 3 turns that whenever guts status is activated, it will increase the party's attack by 20% for 3 turns. So again, another really ideal use for somebody that frankly you know, again, was sort of going to come in there, be your tank, and end up buffing the party, especially considering he has a buster up of 3 turns on his 3rd skill there. But also keep in mind here that remember the guts here was only 2500 HP. Now it's 5000. So this made him a really tanky unit in that regard. Okay, then we get to day 5 here. Now we get to the Cù day, as we like to call it. Cù day was really good. Cù Alter here gets his NP interlude, and this was a doozy. I think a lot of people were looking at Herc and the upgrades he had gotten over time, kind of shit talking Cù Alter. Cù Alter's never been a bad unit. He's always been really good. To some degrees, I even think his performance had maybe exceeded Herc until the Guts upgrade. But yes, I think the Guts upgrade certainly put a lot of that, especially with regards to carding and stuff like that, in a little bit more of a precarious situation. But basically, he gets the upgrade, and that's not only going to increase the amount of damage he does, but also remove one enemy's defensive buffs, activating first. So he basically is going to sit there and just outright strip them of anything that could stop his damage. This makes him in a weird way, and I'm going to say this and someone's probably going to bristle who's watching, but this makes him the more offensive version of Herc. Herc is a little bit more focused on survivability. Cù is going to be a little bit more focused on offense. Now, that being said, again, Herc definitely gets all the buster procs from getting his guts popped, but still, you've got the ability to remove anything that could impede you from doing damage here. So I think this is actually a really nice upgrade for him. Certainly one that he needed, certainly one that helps him again stand out in the face of a really good 4-star that a lot of people love. And then we get to, again, Cù Proto's NP interlude. Same sort of deal, kind of overshadowed by OG Cù. Honestly, the big reason I think for a lot of people to use Cù Proto was his Beast Slayer trait here, that again has gotten some love over time. Basically a really nice power mod against anything that is a wild beast. But basically he gets his NP interlude that now adds quick performance up of 20% before his NP, increases the damage it deals, and also makes it defense ignoring. So really solid upgrade there in that regard. And on top of that, he still has the chance to instant kill and applies a defense down. So I think this certainly helps Proto Cù be a little bit more of the offensive version compared to his other 3-star contemporary. But again, I think some people would argue the 3-star definitely has some capability of dishing some good offense given what his buffs have been as well. So still, though, I like this. Definitely give a little bit more capability to Cù Proto. And then we get to day 6. Yes, I do remember this day mostly because everyone was shocked it was Mephisto and not Castor Jills, because that definitely was like a wait, why'd you go with that 3-star caster and not the one that clearly gets paired better? Anyways, a lot of people actually kind of bristled when Jalter got a buff as well. A lot of people didn't think she needed it. I pointed out, and I talked about this in the Tyra analysis as well, that this is why she gets it. Tyra comes out. Tyra is maybe not as offensive oriented as Jalter, but just due to sheer card performance and the ability to get back to an NP a lot easier, Tyra just kind of really threatened Jalter's standing as a good option as a single target Avenger. So it's not that Jalter was bad, it's just that like Tyra was that kind of had the advantage in just about every single sphere at that point. So what they did is they said, like, look, all right, what has Jalter been known for? She's kind of glass cannon-y, she's very crit oriented, she deals a lot of damage. Let's secure that damage argument. And so basically, unless you're dealing with Genji type stuff, your Jalter's probably going to be out damaging Tyra now because of this NP interlude. So again, we come in here and we take a look at it. She already had the buff block status for one time, and then now she increases the amount of damage, still gets the buff block status, but now also gains 30 crit stars. A much welcome addition to a unit that has a very hard time securing crit stars. So again, I've talked about this before, not only with Mao Nobu, not only with Jalter. People often used to criticize them as saying like, oh, well, it's so hard to soak stars with them. And I told people before, you just must be a bad master if you can't figure out that the easy solution to Avenger star weight is to simply flood the party with stars. And sure enough, this is the devs basically acknowledging that, because the exact buff they gave Jalter was, here's 30 stars. So again, take that, add in a Koyan Skyer and Oberon, boom, there you go, even more stars, and there you go, you're going to be absolutely securing crits with her. So really nice one. Definitely helped out her offensive capability, especially for a unit that really doesn't have nearly the survivability that Tyra has. And then we get to Mephisto, and Mephisto's buff here was a little bit of an interesting one. They turned his kind of annoyingly bad innocent monster here, got rid of the defense down on himself, and replaced it with an attack up of 3 turns of 30%. So really nice. And then also the ability to reduce all enemies healing received of 50%. So again, this can actually be really good for certain really annoying, like high healing challenge and story fights. Something that I think a lot of low star centric accounts probably struggled with. And so this was a really, really good effective counter for that, especially given his third skill already was a 3 times buff block to the enemy. So yeah, this just naturally gives Mephisto yet another reason to be used as a low star caster. All right, and then we get to day 7, but day 7 doesn't matter, so we won't talk about it. I'm just kidding. Anyways, Ereshkigal gets, obviously, her NP interlude. And like I said, when we were talking about Artoria, kind of makes sense now as to why, right? Like, I think you look forward at Melisson, and again, as of this point, Melisson had already been out because these are all happening at the anniversary after 6.2 had been a thing with its banners. So naturally, when Melisson comes out, and a lot of people didn't realize Melisson's damage capability at first, and I was still sitting there already immediately being like, no guys, you don't get it, she's gonna be crazy. And then Oberon comes out, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, I see now. And so basically that ends up really making Melisson pop off at that point. And so a lot of people were already kind of screaming even before that, like, oh my god, can we please get buffs for Eresh? Eresh had been someone that I think for a long time, she had naturally been balanced around the fact that she was a much more support-oriented damage dealer. And so as a result of that, her damage hadn't been that great. Well, they finally come in here, give her a much-needed NP interlude, and as a result of that, oh man, is it a doozy. Does she get a lot of damage? So she now deals more damage naturally. She gets super effective damage against a new niche, the Earth attribute. She already had her Blessing of Kur, but it now also confers a critical attack chance resistance of 20% for 3 turns and instant kill immunity for 3 turns. Man, I bet Skadi wishes she had that. But still, yeah, really a nice buff for Eresh, and really helps her at least survive and maybe not be as good of damage in most cases as Melisson, but still be very viable, very usable, especially for the people that have a devotion to Ereshkigal. So I did like this buff for her, and I even said back at the time, I was kind of happy to see her get it. It was one of those deals where she had always been low man on the totem pole. Seeing her finally not be there, definitely a good thing. So I do like it. I think this is a really good buff for her. All right, then we get to our last buff of the video here. This is going to be Francis Drake. So again, Drake, it was another unit that I think a lot of people don't even see that much nowadays, and it's not because she's bad, it's because a lot of people just really already use the crap out of their Drakes. For a lot of us OG players, we have Drake in spades and basically have already bond-tended her long ago. As a result of that, you didn't see too many people using her. Even then, I think, arts farming had been a much bigger thing as of that point. And you will even see units at this point like, Habitrot. That's going to be coming out at the end of 6.3 as a sort of welfare for everybody to have. So that is another sort of strike against a lot of the AoE writers. And so getting Drake some upgrades here, I think, was a good thing. The problem that I've seen a lot of people say about this buff is that this sort of puts units like Europa now in a much weirder situation and in need of a buff. And that's fine. So that's not really a problem. I think it's a-okay to give a unit a buff if they needed it, even if it makes another unit look worse. That just means that other unit also needs attention. So again, they take her golden rule here and then basically give her the one buff type she was missing, which is Buster performance up of 20% for 3 turns. It also grants her ignore defense for 3 turns, which again, she already had invuln pierce in her kit. So this now means that she shreds just about anything. Again, the fact that this is all on a 6-turn cooldown means double Queen Sky setup, 50% charger. Yeah, we can double pop this skill. So this isn't just a 20% buster up. This can effectively be a 40% buster up then by virtue of that. So I thought this was a really, really nice buff for Drake. Definitely someone that I think hadn't really received a lot of love over time, but definitely like to see Drake get some attention every now and then. Yeah, she can loot. She can definitely loot. So again, thank you guys for watching. That's going to be it for me. That is all of your strengthenings for the year. I will be making all the interludes for the year, but that'll probably be a shorter video by nature. So I will see you guys for the next one. Peace.